It is showtime, I think.
Folks are being admitted now.
Fantastic. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Happy Tuesday, and welcome to another Hummingbird Hour. I am so grateful that you are all with us today. We will formally kick off here in just a moment, just to give everyone a chance to join the conversation today. If you are new to our community, we encourage you to connect with others. So feel free to share, and please do share in the chat what you do, where you're calling from, share your LinkedIn profile, connect with your colleagues, and use the chat as a way to certainly have a dialogue with the community that's with us today, and to ask questions so we can make the most of our conversation today with Ray Arata. So let's kick off. So again, welcome to another episode of Hummingbird Hour. I'm so grateful that you are with us. I know your time is valuable, and I'm appreciative that you choose to be with us, whether you're with us live today or watching the recording in the future. Again, we are excited that the Hummingbird Humanity community is growing. We encourage you to connect with each other. Feel free to mention in the chat where you're attending from, and share your LinkedIn. We've also enabled live captions for anyone who may be deaf or hard of hearing, or prefer to use captions. So please click on the caption button in your Zoom toolbar if you'd like to use the captions. So first, what we want to do is just take a moment to pause and have a moment of silence, recognizing that there have been a number of very difficult and tragic and terrible events that have happened in recent weeks, and in Uvalde, in the war in Ukraine, the decision on Roe v. Wade, which I know is a very difficult conversation for so many in our country, and a number of other events. And I won't try to acknowledge all of them, but I want to just acknowledge that each of you and everyone in our community and in our country and around the world are all likely experiencing some pain right now. So we're just going to pause for about 15 to 20 seconds for a moment of silence and a moment of reflection, and then we'll come back and we'll continue with the show. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I want to make sure we acknowledge that July is Disability Pride Month, and if you don't already follow the Hummingbird Humanity social media channels on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, you'll be able to find please do follow, and you'll find some tips and tools and resources as we share and celebrate Disability Pride Month. We also want to be sure to highlight Hummingbird Speaks, which is our Speakers Bureau. Currently, our Speakers Bureau is focused on celebrating and amplifying queer voices in the LGBTQ+ community. And as all of us in the conversation around how do we, which includes probably all of you, how do we make sure that we are celebrating and amplifying marginalized communities in our workplaces? One of the things we like to say is we and the gay community are queer all year. So even though Pride Month has passed, at least in the sort of traditional celebration, although Pride is celebrated in different months around the year in different places, we are queer all year, and we encourage you to reach out if you need a speaker for one of the other important heritage or celebration days around the LGBTQ+ community. Next month, we have Dr. Jacqueline Duget, who will be joining us to talk about her book. And please make sure you mark your calendars for August 16th at 12 p.m. Eastern, and come back and join us again next month. Or if you're not able to be with us live, be sure to keep an eye out for our Hummingbird newsletter later that week, where we'll share the recording and some highlights from that conversation. Today, I am delighted to welcome my friend and colleague, Ray Arata, who's the co-founder of Better Men Leadership. Ray has recently, I guess it was about a year ago now, so recently, we can say recently, that's fine, released his new book, showing, what is it? Can we go to the next slide? Showing Up. I thought it was Showing Up, but I'm like, I don't trust myself sometimes. Showing Up, How Men Can Become Effective Allies in the Workplace. So let me just share a little bit about Ray, and then Ray, I will welcome you and invite you to share a few words to say hello to the group. Ray Arata, author of Showing Up, How Men Can Become Effective Allies in the Workplace, is a speaker, master facilitator, coach, and most of all, he is an ally in training. As an aspiring ally, Ray's personal mission involves going into the corporate world and getting male executives to stand up and stand strong when it comes to including and advancing women and minorities in the workplace. Ray brings a unique and much needed experiential point of view that supports organizations in meeting men where they are without shame or blame, and guiding them on an inclusionary, heart-centric leadership journey. As a co-founder of Better Men Leadership, a consulting and training firm that seeks to engage men as allies and advocates for diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and justice, Ray is committed to the transformation of the gender perspective from which organizations engage with all stakeholder groups, customers, employees, investors, partners, and the global community. Ray, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Brian. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Well, we always have great conversations, and I know just in our prep conversation a few minutes ago, we remember that you were part of the launch of Hummingbird Humanity 2 years ago, when we launched Hummingbird with Hope, the conversation series, which is the predecessor to Hummingbird Hour, called Hope, Heart, and the Human Spirit. And I know we've had a chance to share our perspectives on this conversation around DEI over the last couple of years, and I always appreciate everything I get to learn from you. So I'm sure that we're going to have a great conversation, and all of you are going to learn hopefully some things today. And as I mentioned earlier, please share your questions in the chat. We want to make sure that we take full advantage of Ray's wisdom and experience and perspective. So Ray, I want to kick off in your bio there, you mention, heart-centric leadership journey. So one of the first things that comes to mind for me when I think about men and heart-centric are those two worlds don't seem to go together. So I'm just curious why that's important to you, and how do you find that resonates, or how do men react to that sort of message when you start to have that conversation?
So what I first want to say is, yes, they can go together. and I can only point to my own journey that had me go through a 1-2 punch wake up call some 23 years ago. That was I was as a result of a divorce and a partnership breakup in business that I was ill-equipped to deal with all the emotions that would come with 2 heavy-duty events like that. So I did what most men do, and I stuffed my emotions, until one day my manager in the financial services business called me out on my behavior. And the way he did that kind of sounded like the way my then wife called me out. And I said, you know what? I've heard this at home. I'm hearing it at work. I think I need to do something. Thank you for calling me on my stuff. And so he sat me down and he handed me a brochure. And I looked at this thing and it said Men's Weekend. And I'm like, what the bleep is this? And he kind of smiled and he said, can't tell you what goes on there, but here, call my wife. Changed my life. So on trust alone, I went to this weekend, and I got a chance to see how the pained little boy in me was driving the adult bus. And so it was an introspective journey that basically connected me to my emotions. And there were 35 men on staff and 35 other people. And this was in Houston, Texas, of all places, because there was nothing going on in California. So I had this immersive experience that I saw men speaking to their emotions, their fear, their shame, their sadness, their anger, their joy. And I learned about accountability and integrity and all these extremely important life skills. And I left that weekend, and that set me on my journey, which is now 15,000 plus hours of working with men that I've reconstituted into the corporate space. And what I've come to learn, it's only happened a gazillion times, is that if I go first, if I am vulnerable, if I'm authentic, it makes it possible for other men to do the same. So I hold the belief that all men, regardless of how we identify, can connect to their emotions. And it's the next iterative technology that the world needs for men to be more heart-centered, because we're in the majority and we hold the position power platform. And so that's why I'm intent on focusing on men to get them out of here and into here. And that's where change is going to happen.
Yeah, I love that and appreciate it. And it reminds me of one of the stories that I like to tell is when I started my first job in corporate America. I walked in the door, and nobody told me when I like to, well, the way I say it is I have my coat of my emotions, and I'm supposed to hang them up on a hook, and they stay there until I leave for the, at the end of the day. And I just knew that was the reality of what was expected of me. And it is, men have been the dominant force in creating our workplace cultures. So this conversation around connecting with heart, it impacts everyone. And because men hold most leadership roles, like the conversation you're having is so important to allow all of us to be humans when we enter the workplace.
Yeah, I learned a saying a long time ago that hurt people hurt people. And I say that because a lot of men are in pain. And if they're in pain, they create pain for those around them. And so I want to dismantle those barriers and show men a new way that, by the way, if they think about their colleagues, their kids, their partners, their parents, their community, if they chose to ask how those folks would like to experience them, they'd all point to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just a matter of time.
Work in progress. So you started to tell us about how you got into this work, and I'll just give some space for you if there's anything else you want to add on how you started this work. I also am curious if you could about the journey of the Better Men Conference, because I would have almost flubbed there for a moment of when I was the co-founder of Better Men Leadership, because it used to be Better Men Conference, if I remember correctly, and you've expanded over the course of time. Yeah.
So your two questions go hand in hand. So when I was on this man's journey thing for a while, I met a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant who said, you've got something here. Men look like you, sound like you in corporate America. They need to hear from you. I even did Tim Kelly's True Purpose work and got a download basically that I need to go talk to these guys and help them use their power, position, and privilege to leverage change. And so she invited me to go to a women's leadership event, and told me I'd probably be the only guy there. And I went there, and I was the only guy there. And I had my man in the mirror moment number 2, which had me go, oh my God, now I get what my mom was saying. My mom is Italian American, and all I used to ever hear her say was, my brother, he got to go to college. He got to play sports, all this because he was a boy. Click. And then I looked at my wife, who's the oldest of 7 kids in an Italian American family in San Francisco. Her father was a supervisor, a realtor, and the youngest brother was running the business. And then I thought of my daughter, who was going to be graduating from Duke with a degree in computer science. And I'm like, somebody needs to do something. Somebody needs to do something. Maybe it's me. So I thought, I was at the 3% conference hosted by and founded by Kat Gordon. And I was leading something with all the women there. And I'm like, I got to do something for men. And I walked up to the planner there and I said, I've got this idea. Would you help me do it? And Lynn Edwards is still with me to this day. And so I called up a bunch of corporate friends saying, I've got this crazy idea. I want to advance healthy masculinity into the leadership conversation. I want to do this conference. Would you back me? And they said, yes. Michael Kimmel came, he spoke. Rayona Sharpnick. I had walked back. I didn't realize this until recently, but I was at Michael Kimmel's International Masculinities Conference in New York. And I knew Sheryl Sandberg and Jennifer Siebel Newsom were backstage. And so I walked back there like I owned the joint, and no one stopped me. And I know why now, because I was tall and I was white and I was a man. And I introduced myself to them. And to this day, I have relationships with both of those wonderful women. And that got me started with the conference. And so the conference was driven by my inner activist, if you will. And I started that. And before long, companies started asking me, hey, could you do this event? Hey, could you do a training? So while the Better Man Conference is still intact, the name of our company now is Better Man Movement, because what I've been trying to do is advance a movement. So that has us do male cohort trainings, keynotes, a whole host of events, executive coaching. And then when I wrote the book, which came out in January, the book has a curriculum feel, and I'm getting a lot of attention, a lot of interest in the message that's coming through on the book. So I'm not pushing the rock up the hill anymore. No more Sisyphus.
Well, this work can feel like that, right?
Yes.
That we are, the way that I typically talk about it is I have those moments where I feel overwhelmed or discouraged, and I have to say, you know what? Let's look. First of all, I say, like, what are the things I can say that I've done where I've made a difference? What are those moments? And sometimes and often those are moments that happen with individuals. And then I remember there are so many other humans, like everyone that's here with us today, and yourself, and so many colleagues that we have a chance to know and learn from, and many others. And I remember I'm not alone in the journey. And so that's how I sort of process that. But it can feel like you're pushing a rock up a hill that's never going to get to the top.
The only difference there for me is, since I don't belong to any particular target group, and I did for a short bit when I had my hips replaced, when I was on the other side of the coin, because of my white male privilege, I could turn this all off if I want. I could pack up and go away. And I have to remember that that's not a choice for a lot of people. And so this is a lifelong endeavor for me. That's very personal to me, which is why I'm going to keep doing it for as long as I can talk.
I love that. I love that. Well, and in that spirit, what was the inspiration behind this book? What sort of led to the message and the concept?
So when I wrote my first book, I was challenged by a guy by the name of David Fabricius, and he said to me, Ray, you're playing a one-to-one game. You need to play a one-to-many game. You need to write a book. And I was running one day when I shouldn't have been, because I had osteoarthritis in my hip, and I'm running along in this smooth surface, and there was this little tennis ball sized rock that my foot happened to land on, and I broke my 5th metatarsal on my foot. And the doctor said, you can't swim, you can't ride a station, you can't do anything. And the little voice in my head said, maybe I should write the book, because I've got all this stuff swimming around in my head. So when I wrote my first book, it was because I needed to get it out. When this book came about, and I had 6 years of Better Man Conference, steep learning curve. I realized I needed to get it out, and it was time for me to write my next book. COVID hit, and I said, I'm gonna do this. And I reached out to my friend Mike Robbins, author of 5 books. Most recent book is We're Better Together. He's been a keynote speaker at my conference, and he introduced me to his agent. She liked it. She put me out to publishers, and off to the races. And so what I didn't realize was that this go around, that I remember when I was writing the book, I'm like, I am not going to cut any corners. I'm going to go all the way and access my inner teacher and bring everything I got forward. And that's what happened. And it's kind of weird writing a book during COVID, because the days of book tours and book signings and all that kind of stuff, are gone for now anyway. And so it needed to be done. And, in January it came out, and I've been being interviewed on podcasts ever since. And we'll see what happens.
One of the book title includes the message around allyship.
Yes.
Talk to us about the ally journey and how do you frame that and how you share that message.
So thank you for that question. So in my book, whenever I include the word ally in a sentence, I also say and inclusionary leaders. Allies and inclusionary leaders, because anybody can be an ally to anyone. And the way I hold ally is a person that will stand for, use what they have in support of another person, whether it's creating safety, whether it's being human, whether it's speaking up, whether it's lending a hand. It's not just talk, it's action. And so when I created it with my former partner, the Allies Journey, 4 steps emerged. And I've since worked on those, initially focusing them on men, but now it applies to broad-based allyship. So the first step in dude talk is acknowledge your stuff. Well, what's your stuff? Your bias, which even looks at when you were growing up, fatherly influences. Like, how did dad hold himself out to be masculine? How did he interact with your mother? How did he emote or not emote? It's that level of depth. Your privilege. And with respect to privilege, understanding that privilege doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. It's akin to advantage, and distinguishing between earned and unearned, not demonizing it, humanizing it. 3, emotions. Why are emotions important? Well, because when someone lets you know maybe you said or did something that offended them, if you're not aware, you might go into shame, you might go into fear. So just knowing that these emotions are present in you and can influence your words or your actions is valuable. And last but not least is the man box, those unwritten rules of what it means to be a man, right? And so that's just step 1. And I contextualize that as awareness. Step 2 is listen with empathy and compassion. That opens up the door to presence the lived experiences of others. And whenever I've done trainings and I've illuminated the experiences of others to men, I hear them say, oh my God, I had no idea. What can I do? Because for us white cisgendered guys, we're not experiencing the pain. We're in the club. And so when they get alerted without shame or blame to the pain or struggle other people are experiencing, they're human, most of them, and so then 3rd step is take responsibility for the impact of your unexamined privilege or bias, and when necessary, clean it up. That opens up the door for the understanding, appreciation, and practice of intention versus impact, as well as accountability. It also looks at, if you're an inclusionary leader, how do you call somebody in as opposed to calling them out? And then last but not least, the ever so more important step is committing to new practices and behaviors. That's action. So those 4 steps are embedded in me. I write about them. They drive my keynotes and my trainings, and I offer it to the world because anybody can take those 4 steps to be an ally to anybody. So there you have it. A lot there.
There's a lot. I have so many questions.
I know.
And I won't try to ask them all. The one that is really the loudest in my mind right now is one of the first things you said was in what I think you said in dude language.
Yes.
When I think about, I started my journey as a DEI practitioner in about 8 years ago when I was at the Walt Disney Company. And when I stepped into DEI, I thought I knew a lot of the stuff that I realized I didn't know. And I've learned a lot over the course of the last 8 years. And one of the recurring conversations is, how do we get men into the work, the dialogue, the work, the commitment to change, whatever way you want to frame it. And when I talk to men, so many times what I hear from them is, I don't know where I fit in this work or this conversation. I don't know if I should be in some of these spaces. I don't feel like I'm invited to those spaces. I feel like I'm an outsider. And sometimes even today I hear this sort of low murmur, sort of subtle murmur around, I feel like I'm under attack and I don't really know how. So then I end up in the defense and not part of the conversation. And I think we all would probably agree that men have to be part of the change that we're looking to make to create organizations that are equitable and inclusive and diverse. So how do you tackle that those realities that we're facing with men related to this DEI conversation?
So I attack with an open heart. I changed the word attack. Now there's an art of meeting these men where they are, without shame or blame and without judgment. And these men encapsulate 5 states of men that I write about in my book. And the first state are the men that feel threatened by DEI initiatives, in that they feel that it threatens their job. Underline there, because that's their unexamined privilege. This same group of late, all this attention on white men is a distraction. Again, their unexamined privilege. And these men can be met where they are and give them a chance to be listened to, but then it requires a shift to distinguishing earned and unearned privilege, educating them and giving them the choice around how they want to be experienced by other people. Not everyone's going to self-select in, but it's possible, it's doable. I've done it. The second group are the ones that feel excluded. They're the ones that say there's a ERG or a BRG for LGBTQIA, BIPOC, Latin, whatever other ERG is, but what about us? Now, the upshot of that is this group, under the temporary pain of feeling excluded, can be flipped. And what I'm starting to see is men's ERGs with good intentions starting to show up. So I'm working with some companies to basically utilize the energy behind the men's ERG to get things going. The third group is probably the biggest one. Those are afraid to say or do the wrong thing, so they do nothing, which signals complicity. And that requires a page out of my man book of have a different relationship with fear, breathe into it, don't stay frozen, and move forward as an ally, knowing that you're going to make mistakes, but get up off the horse, go to that third step in the ally's journey, take responsibility for your mistake, clean it up, and resolve to do better. And then the last 2 categories are the ones that want to do what's right, but they don't know what to do. And then last but not least, the allies in training. So there's these, when DEI practitioners who are sitting in the question, how do I engage my men as part of my overall strategy? This level of understanding of these 5 states of men will go a long way for them to start to curate and create possibilities to reach those men.
Again, so many things I could ask about. I'm going to ask about one specific piece of it, which again is in your bio, the ally in training language. And sometimes I've seen it listed as aspiring ally. Why is that? Why is it important for you to say an ally in training versus I'm an ally?
So there's a word that's not in the bio that I use called forever an ally in training. And I could be playful and say, ask my wife what happens 3 or 4 days before a Better Man conference, and I have a huge insert foot in mouth moment where the expert acts like an idiot or says or does something unbecoming of an ally. So by calling myself forever an ally in training, it reminds me that I always have a lot to learn. And in my men's work, we talk about shadow beliefs and behaviors, those parts of us that we typically hide, repress, and deny. And part of the art of becoming more aware and introspective is understanding that these limiting beliefs exist inside of us and are part of who we are. And when we choose to shine light that they exist, we stay mindful that we still may go unconscious. And I have, and I will. So I have to remember that I'm human and give myself permission to be human. And whenever I do a training or talk about this stuff, it creates more space for other people to be human, as opposed to getting things perfect. Right. And Kelly in the chat there asked, what is excluded? That's the excluded group. There you go.
I love that we have note takers in the room who help there. Thank you for following the chat, Ray. I appreciate it. In the spirit of that conversation, what comes up for me is the influence of white supremacy culture into our organizations. And one of the tenets of white supremacy culture or white supremacy messaging is perfection is the goal. That's what we're looking to achieve. So tackling that, because it is counterproductive to allowing humans to be human, for us to do this work. The way that I typically say it is, my job is to be an advocate for all marginalized communities. And there's other ways I can say that, but that's one of the core responsibilities I have in my work. I will never know all the things I need to know about all of the experiences of the communities and the individuals in those communities. So there's always going to be something new to learn. And on a regular basis, I invite the team at Hummingbird to say, Brian, I know you mean well right now, but you got it wrong, because I need to have those voices from those, who have other lived experiences to say, hey, you need to have this additional learning and additional perspective. And before I started this work, that would have been really hard for me to have that moment. And I've learned that I have to be really grateful that people choose to respect me enough and care for me enough to say, hey, you got to learn something. But that's not the way that our cultures and companies are really defined today, and men have defined those cultures, as we've talked about already. So how do men react to that, though, when you're having those conversations, to say, like, it's okay to say I got it wrong and I made a mistake and apologize?
So I seek to break down those barriers, and I have to go first. If I'm going to ask them to do something, I have to model it. And so what you're speaking to and how I hold this is it's all around vulnerability. And, perfectionism is a trap. And when I talk to leaders, not just male leaders, but for our purposes today, male leaders, for them to understand that their behavior sets the tone for the rest of their team and those that are following them. And what most men don't realize, because a lot of them think vulnerability is a sign of weakness, I educate them that vulnerability is a sign of strength, and that it actually engenders trust. And at a Better Man conference in San Francisco, I did this. I've done it once or twice. I said, guys, I want to show you something. And I said, I want to speak to everyone, to the women in the room, women identifying. I said, if I share with you that I'm afraid or sad, or that I don't know the answer to something, does that make you want to trust me more or less? And by a show of hands, and all the hands go up. And I do that because is to show them that as leaders, they're all watching you. And if you are human, you're going to give everybody else an opportunity to be human. If you have this impossible standard and you're perfect, you're setting the rest of your team up for failure. And when there's those moments of stress, and look at what's happened with COVID. Oh my God. I remember in the beginning of COVID, it was that day in March. I'm on a Zoom conference call with my partners, and I'm looking at all the long faces. And we always would do a check-in, and I just said, can we get friggin' real here? Can you all really tell me what's really going on? And the energy just went, whew, and people checked in. And then I had this idea. I said, if this is going on here, it's going on out there. So I called 3 different men, said, I've got this idea. I have this sense that if there was ever a time that people are stressed, that command and control appears very tempting, whatever the case may be. I want to do a every other Friday call where I create the space for leaders to come and get real. It was our Getting Real series. I got an email back from one guy said, "Brah, I cried 2 times yesterday. I went into command and control at home and yelled at my kids." And so it was just this. So again, barriers to break down. I've always sensed that behind the veneer of most men, what's really true is that they're in pain just like the rest of us. Somebody's just got to go first. Somebody's just got to go first.
Which allows it to be safe for others to go next and
You
follow.
got it. That's
Absolutely.
exactly right.
Absolutely. I had a thought and it just completely left. So we're gonna go back to the questions, and it'll come back to me in a moment. So what? Oh, I know what it was. So what you're starting to share are different frameworks and concepts and ways that you approach the work that you do with men. As you know, in our prep call, I realized I don't know what the Better Man community, what are the ways that you partner with organizations and with DEI people like myself. So can you share with us a little bit about how you've evolved and how, because I know that was a challenge for me and continues to be a challenge for me of how do we get men in the conversation, and you have some solutions you offer. So I just love to help everyone understand that.
So the origin was the conference as an event to galvanize people. And for a little while, I was just doing the Better Man conference. And what started to happen fairly routinely was companies would ask, are you doing anything else? Could you do anything else? Are you doing trainings? Or could you be a keynote speaker? Could you be on a panel? Could you help us do an event? Whatever the case may be. Or could you coach this executive? And so where we've evolved to is that we're now called the Better Man Movement. And what's fascinating, and finally it's happening, companies used to be afraid to put attention and intention on the men. And now they're realizing, whether it's a group of white male executives that are on their heels because of all the attention, they don't know what to do or want to know what to do. Facilitated conversations with white leaders is starting to be something that I've been doing a lot. Doing a keynote presentation on what it means to be an ally with a subset focus on the men, so that the men feel included. Because right now, with the spotlight of attention on the majority men want to know what to do. Men do care. DEI leaders want to know how to engage the men. Right. So in my book, there's a chapter called The Multi-Year Game Plan, and I talk about all these intervention points. And so whether it's sending a delegation or sponsoring the Better Man conference, using that as a kickoff to have a cohort training, all of those possibilities are there. So at the end of the day, we're a training company, we're a coaching company, we're an event company. And oftentimes a bit of consulting happens and is needed because we're in that subset specialty of men. And so my background with respect to men and the very steep learning curve that I've been on for now 9 years, and translating all this into bite-sized pieces so that I don't get spit out like a rejected virus, because you have to be aware of that inside cultures, not just here in the United States, but outside. That's what ends up happening with us. And so hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I love it. And as I already said, I may follow up and have a conversation with you about some of the clients we're working with. Since we're talking about the various offerings from the Better Men community, tell us about the conference. And I just want to share with everyone, I had a chance to attend a conference in fall of 2019 before the world ended, and we all went into to our homes to stay safe. And something that I really believe, and I say a lot, is this, when we're doing the workshops and the things that we do with the employees at our clients, I say, if you're feeling discomfort, that's a good thing. The discomfort means that change is happening, and you're growing and you're learning. And I remember when I went to the Better Man conference, it was like an entire day of discomfort for me. So that, in the spirit of practicing what I preach, I'm like, that's awesome. And it was even for me as someone who's a gay man and a person with a disability and who's really worked on sharing my emotions, that day was like, there was a lot of like, let's talk about real stuff, which I'm like, we don't do this. So I know you've sort of evolved as have everyone in the world of COVID. What's coming up in the Better Man conference space, and what can people tap into?
So during COVID, we were virtual and we did plenty of conferences. And in November, on November 2nd, we are going to do something we've never done before, and that is we're going to simultaneously hold 2 live audiences, one in New York and one in San Francisco, with Jennifer Brown will be on the stage in New York. I'll be on the stage in San Francisco, and half of the facilitators will be in each location. And there will be a virtual audience. So the idea, I got this idea was when I was a keynote speaker to a live audience, but I was on the Jumbotrons thing and they were fielding questions and I was doing a presentation. And it occurred to me, well, if we can do that, then we can stream both ways. And I talked to some people and it looks like we're going to be able to do that. This year, we're going to focus on power, patriarchy, and privilege. So we're going to focus on those 3 themes. And the end game of the Better Man conference, given that it's only a 1-day event, is to get people feeling inspired, thinking and feeling differently, such that this idea of putting themselves on a path of being an ally and an inclusionary leader is doable, and they don't have to do it alone. And so this year, I'm really excited that we're going to be doing the conference. I'm beyond excited that I'm going to be live. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
And I saw someone in the chat say hybrid events are the future big time, and I certainly have seen a number of conferences that have found that the hybrid approach, and I love that you're going to stream from coast to coast. So
do I have the ability to screen share to show a quick layout for people can see the menu?
I believe you should have that. So give it a go.
Real quick. So this is the agenda. So we're going to do a welcome. Every time we do a conference, we do kind of a can opener, if you will, to kind of get people in the room feeling, speaking, and talking. I'll do my opening remarks, and then we're going to unpack power. Elfie Martinez is going to run that, and then we're going to get our hands dirty and look at patriarchy. Mark Green, who wrote the Little Me Too book, will lead that. Then we're going to move into embracing and activating privilege. Dax Devlon Ross wrote the book Letter to My White Male Friends, great book, by the way. And Adrienne Lawrence will take us through that. And then Jennifer will do power, reset, and integration. And then we're going to do a panel with a couple of leaders, and then Jennifer and I will close things out. So this is what it's going to look like. And yeah, really, really excited. We're ahead of the game this year. And then how do I stop sharing? How do I do that? Get rid of this. Where did you go? Boom. There you go. Somebody did that for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, so that's just a quick little, that's what it'll look like.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Lindsay. It's good to have technical people in the background. I have certainly had those moments where I've lost the Zoom screen. So awesome. Well, congrats on the plan of becoming to life, and
Yes.
I wish you success as you deliver that hybrid coast to coast event. So I want to talk about a couple of the conversations around masculinity, and I'm sure that you have a point of view on like the way that masculinity has been defined and how that needs to evolve. So can you just talk about that, your perspective on masculinity? Yeah.
So the first thing I would say is masculinity is an inside job. It's not how I look, or it's how I present. To me, masculinity, when I'm speaking to men, is about emotional literacy and awareness, if you will. It's about truth. It's about integrity. It's about accountability. It's about being human. It's about dismantling the man box rules and rewriting what it means to be a healthy masculine man. It's about heart. And so, Brian, I think you and I talked about this a couple of years ago, but when I was, I'm a co-leader in the Mankind Project, and oftentimes men ask me to be a mentor on their path of leadership. And after the third gay man asked me to be his mentor, I said, so talk to me, why are you choosing me? Because, they want to be healthy masculine men, their own version of what that is. And each of them kind of said the same thing. They said, Ray, you represent the heterosexual alpha male that I need to do my work around so that I can be with, lead, follow, not get charged all the time, right? And so it was an amazing experience for me and them to support them on their journey. And so I share that because, it's something that I hold very near and dear. And in my book, a white male cisgendered leader, the CEO of Cardinal Health, said, are you asking anybody else what masculinity means to them? And I said, I've been thinking about it. And I ended up writing the chapter called Too Often Excluded Voices of Masculinity. And I interviewed a Black trans man, a heterosexual Black man, a gay Asian man, a white cisgendered heterosexual man, and a white gay man, the former CDO of Staples, Tom Borden. And I asked them, what does healthy masculinity mean to you? What does it mean to be an ally? What might you offer? And it was one of my favorite chapters of the book. Favorite chapters. And so I've been steeped in this masculinity exploration. I don't use the word toxic masculinity. I use the word unhealthy masculinity. But it's not about how I look, even though I'm masculine, I got a mustache, I'm tall, all that nonsense has nothing to do with my masculinity. Nothing.
Yeah, and I appreciate the language alternative with unhealthy masculinity. Something that that we really try to lean into at Hummingbird. We don't want to sanitize or ignore or try to make the systemic oppression that exists go away. That it is real. We acknowledge it. But the language we use is a way for people to connect with the conversation in a different way. And toxic masculinity, which I understand why the why that language emerged. It is for so many men. It is an attack, and so the unhealthy is okay. Well, how do I move to healthy masculinity? What does that look like? There's another paradigm we can look at.
Absolutely. If I'm saying her name, Nadi. I love her question in chat. What are your thoughts on heartfully segregating white men from team training and workshop experiences? That word heartfully, that's the answer. That's the way. And to invite them into a conversation to get them on board is what it's all about. And that needs to be languaged and messaged in such a way, because if they're not feeling included or they're under attack, somebody's got to meet them where they're at and support their shift and invite them into what I call heart-based leadership.
Yeah. The other thing well, and
go ahead.
And well, I would say that that's not something that we have, that's not a step we've taken in the programs we've delivered at Hummingbird. What do you recommend? Do you recommend this sort of segmentation to your clients, or how do you help a client figure out what's the right answer and a way to think about that, how they engage the men in their organization?
The key word is receptivity, openness, and willingness. So on a client by client basis, if they're hearing from their white male leaders, and there's trust between that DI leader and those white male leaders, then it's a conversation that they have, an invitation, if you will. And I come into the picture facilitating a conversation. And one of the first places I go is to give them voice, what's going on. But I also come from a place of, let's look at these notions of gender equality, equity, belonging, justice. And I want to ask each of you, why should you care? And then why should you change now, so that it personalizes for them their core why, and then all sorts of stuff comes up in the course of the conversation. And the only goal of that particular meeting is to meet them where they are and to help them consider getting on board. Because once that click happens with them, then we can proceed, then it can be messaged, then those particular white male leaders can be curated into trainings instead of just being an executive sponsor that signed his name next to something and he's not walking the talk. I'm looking to get them in here because that's where the good stuff is.
I love that. I want to ask one other in this, to just have another lens on the masculinity conversation. In your book, you use the words mansplaining, manterrupting, and monopolizing.
And misappropriation.
And so do you want to share a little bit about what those words mean and how you engage men and thinking through those
Yeah, so I'm going to assume that most of the people on the call are familiar with microaggressions, but one of the things in my recent training that we created a slide for is micro inclusions. And in order to understand microaggressions in the context of men, those four words, mansplaining, manterrupting, monopolizing, misappropriating, are ways that I educate men on the seemingly small things that occur all the time inside the workplace, whether it's men dominating the airspace, monopolizing the airspace, or mansplaining, like a woman will say something, or anybody else for that matter, and a guy will believe that what needs to be explained is what she meant to say. Or getting louder and manterrupting, or a woman voices an idea but no one recognizes it until a guy voices it, and then a guy gives that guy credit. What I seek to do is to educate them. This is what's going on and has been going on, and let's talk about the impact. Imagine if this happens, in microaggressions, death by 1,000 cuts. If these things keep happening, I attempt to show men this is what happens. The woman will stop speaking up. When she stops speaking up, then her credibility goes down the tube. And when she's not being listened to, her desire to stick around plummets, and she's probably going to leave the company, and you're going to miss out on her contributions. So I help them see this is what happens, this is who it impacts, and this is a likely result. Then I shift to what are some of the things you can do. Micro inclusions. Like if you're aware that this dynamic goes on and you're a leader, call on her, invite her into the conversation, ask the guys to hold off, put rules that 2 minutes per person in your meeting, whatever the case may be, right? Instead of asking the woman to bring the coffee, get the water, you do it. You set up the Christmas party, right? You order the lunch in. What are you doing at home? Right? So, I mean, it's just, and I'm playful with that, but these are the smaller things, and now I say that from a white male privilege perspective, but these small things happen all the time to people who don't identify like me. And it adds up. So we got to start somewhere. And then the bigger efforts are, what do you do when a guy goes rogue and you got to call him out? What does that look like? What do you do when somebody comes up and says, so-and-so has been doing this? How do you have that call-in conversation and give this person the feedback? Encourage them to go have a cleanup conversation, right?
Yes. Well, and that
There's
goes
a
back
lot
to
there.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to one of the things we talked about earlier is the is helping, and this is true for everyone, but particularly male leaders, be okay with acknowledging I got something wrong, I need to apologize and make it right, and I have something to learn, and that is okay. We're humans and we're imperfect. So, but that is an evolution that so many of us have, and you know, I'm part of that journey of someone who's had to learn to show up differently as a leader and as a manager and as a colleague, and it hasn't, and sometimes I default back to old behaviors because they're familiar and they're comfortable, and I have to challenge myself to step back into the new space. So I see you're reading the question in the chat, Ray, so I've been talking to give you time to read.
Yeah, so to answer Kelly, I do see this, and my intention and hope is that somebody, one of the leaders in these all white male groups, is aware of this and can start to do things to dismantle that which is typically unconscious for most people. And so when representation starts to occur in those groups, sure, there's going to be men still being unconscious and acting in non-inclusive ways. That's why we have a lot of work to do, right? And so this is an awareness raising, galvanizing, one man at a time game. And the best way to hit something like this head on is to get the leader who's in charge to be aware of this and do what's necessary to shift these dynamics. That's the only way. Otherwise, it'll perpetuate.
And you know, I think that the one perspective that I would add to that, which is inherent in what you just shared, is the shift in whether we want to look at it through the lens of masculinity or through organizational culture or through how do we tear down systems of oppression, and all of those things are important. This is a marathon, not a sprint. It's going to happen over the course of many years and many individual moments with many different individual humans. And you know, I hope that when I retire someday, hopefully I'll get to that place in my life. I'll get to retire and I'll get to look back and I'll get to say, you know, in 20 years, wow, look how organizations have changed. But I don't, you know, and I hope that we're making change and making an impact today. But the real evolution is going to be realized in 10 and 20 years when we hopefully see leadership teams that are diverse and representative of the world around us in very meaningful ways. Not to say we shouldn't aim for that now, but it's just going to take time for that change to really transpire and infuse into organizational cultures.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So those are my final words of wisdom. So I know we only have a couple minutes left, Ray. So would you like to just share any final thoughts, words of wisdom, any messages that you'd like to leave the group with, or those who are watching later on?
I would say, for those of you that don't identify as part of the majority, to contemplate. There's got to be one or two good white guys in your organization, and to reach out to them, develop a relationship, ask for their support, to keep advancing this movement, because this kind of work happens one man at a time. And rare is it when a man is asked to help that he says no. So this is a heart-based conversation. Send some folks to the Better Man, you know, or one of the things I said to one of my contacts at a large company, I said, buy 10 books and go to 10 men and say, hey, read this and let's have a conversation later. No need to do the heavy lifting. That's what part of the book's for. I've learned in men's work that some guys aren't ready to do a men's weekend. Some guys aren't ready to join a men's group. But when no one's looking, they're going to read a book. And maybe it'll get them thinking. This is total grassroots stuff. So a lot of ways to activate the men. And those are a couple of my ideas. And I just want to say thank you, Brian, to you and your team for having me here, as well as everyone's questions. This was great today.
Yeah,
So thank you.
absolutely. Ray, thank you so much for being with us and for sharing your wisdom and your experience. I know I learned a few things today, as I always do in our conversations, and hopefully others did as well. For all of you with us today and those of you watching later, thank you for being part of the Hummingbird community. We are glad that you're here. Please connect. Please use our resources on the Hummingbird website. Please share with us if there's something that you'd like to see us do. We love your feedback and thoughts as well. And join us next month for Hummingbird Hour. So Ray, thank you so much. And for everyone who's with us today and those watching later, until next time, stay safe and be well. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.